People rose
You
from the
sat
dead
there
all
and
the
said,
time.
what I would really like to have is, I'd love to have an atheist
I would love that.
writing about
Yes.
Jesus really rose
I
from
would.
the dead.
That would be fantastic to me, yes.
Sir, that's an impossibility.
Relativists would argue that they have their beliefs and, they committed this act and they justified it themselves. But we hold our own beliefs and we must defend those. And we must defend ourselves against, intruding beliefs.
Really?
You can still maintain a relative philosophy.
Well, I never said you can't be a moral relativist and go out and hire gunmen to support your relative position. But what I'm arguing is, if you're going to be a consistent thinker, as a moral relativist, you have to acknowledge that what those terrorists did at the World Trade Center was not absolutely evil. It was just relatively evil from your perspective. And then the difficult question becomes, why do you want to lay your perspective on somebody else?
To put an end to acts like they committed, keep them from committing more of them.
Yeah, but if you accept relativism, you understand that reality is simply something you create in your own head.
And reality is, we have created on our head that we must defend ourselves. And every culture has to defend its own beliefs. Whether or not they believe, they can do whatever they want over there, but they come messing up our stuff, and we got to do something about it.
Yeah, but if you're true to your moral relativism, you have to acknowledge that it doesn't matter ultimately whether you bomb buildings or feed starving people. It's of no ultimate significance. It's just a personal bias, a personal prejudice.
There's a difference between a bias and a prejudice and killing 5,000 people. And that's part of what we believe as a country, is that that kind of stuff is wrong. And we have to do something about it. We're not going to go stop any Islamic countries if they don't come messing with our stuff, because, as a relativist, I can say that, cool, they can hold their beliefs, whether they go to heaven, hell, whatnot, that's their thing. But, yeah, when they come over here.
Yeah, but sir, if you're consistent with your relativism, you have to acknowledge that what a person chooses is right for them.
If it was right for them.
And I'm standing here saying, you know that it wasn't right for them. It was wrong for them to slaughter innocent life.
Yeah, that's why we're retaliating.
Well,
that's what we believe, that it was wrong.
Obviously, they believed that what they were doing was right because they thought that it was worth dying for. Because those pilots, the hijackers, died for their cause. They damn sure thought that they were doing the right thing. But I don't think they did the right thing, and I don't think anybody in this country thinks they did the right thing. That's what moral relativism is. Yes, they thought it was right, but we don't.
Yeah, but moral relativism says there is no right and there is no wrong.
There's right
it's
for
all
you.
relative.
There is right for you.
Fine. I can say this is right for me, but if you disagree with me, I'm not right and you're not wrong. It's all relative. I mean,
but
just think about your position.
If I kill you or attack you, you're still going to have to retaliate to continue living,
Yeah, but you're in a real bind as a moral relativist. Because as a moral relativist, you have to think about your position on abortion, homosexuality, battered wives, abused children.
Oh my God,
think about your position, and then realize that the opposite of whatever position you hold is equally valid.
It sounds like you're suggesting that we take personal responsibility instead of listening to what other people think is right? What a novel concept! Why, this is fabulous! If we all think for ourselves, maybe we'll finally reach our own truth.
Let me say it one more time to see if I can communicate a little more clearly to you.
I think we
If
did
you're a
fabulous.
moral relativist, think about your position. Obviously, I don't know your position on abortion, homosexuality, battered wives, abused children. Now, if you're a moral relativist, you have to acknowledge that the opposite of whatever it is you hold on those hot emotional topics is equally valid. I refuse to do that. I insist that the terrorist bombings on the World Trade Center are not equally valid as my position, which is, do not murder innocent life. But if you're a moral relativist, and if you're going to be intellectually consistent and responsible for your own belief in moral relativism, you have to acknowledge that the terrorists are just as right as you are, because right and wrong are just relative. But you see, you moral relativists don't do that. Instead, you moral relativists go running around saying, oh no, that was absolutely wrong. No, it wasn't absolutely wrong. If you're a moral relativist, there is no such thing as absolute wrong. There's relative wrong, but it's all a crapshoot. It's all relative. I'm just holding you to be consistent and responsible for your belief system the same way you hold me to be consistent and responsible with my belief system. That's all I'm doing. And you know very well you can't do it. You know very well that you don't say, oh, Matthew Shepard was murdered because he was homosexual. Well, it's all relative. That's quite all right. If you want to go out and bash gays, that's cool. You don't do that. Instead, when you're confronted by the slaughter of a Matthew Shepard, you say, hey, guess what, guys? That's wrong. That's really, really wrong. You don't kick back saying, oh, well, what are we having for dinner tonight? You can't live out your moral relativism. Why? Because God has wired you in such a way that you have a conscience and you got a rational mind, which doesn't allow you to say, oh, yeah, go out and bash gays, that's cool. Because your conscience says, no, it's not cool. It's really wrong, isn't it?
Moral relativism doesn't mean being passive. It means accepting what other people believe, but choosing your own actions and choosing what you do about what other people believe.
Fine. As a moral relativist, you can choose your own actions. But what you cannot do is tell somebody else that they're wrong in what they freely choose. Because that's elitist, it's arrogant, it's pathetic. If you hold to your moral relativism, you simply say, I choose to do what I choose to do, you choose to do what you choose to do, the terrorist chooses to do what he chooses to do, those who murder Matthew Shepard choose to do what they choose to do. And it's all relative. One's not right, the other's not wrong, it's all relative. You can't live that out, can you guys? It's impossible.
Beliefs are separate from actions, though. And anybody is free to believe whatever they want. It's when those actions start getting carried out that you have to make a decision about what to do. And if your beliefs turn into actions, my beliefs will have to turn into actions about what I will do. I will not stand by and watch somebody be murdered because I think it's okay for them to believe that they should murder. If they believe that they should murder, fine. If they actually start to, not fine. That's the difference.
Fine, but what you've got to realize is you can't live out your moral relativism. You don't do that. Instead, you make some incredible statements about what's really right and what's really wrong.
The only accounts that you have here that corroborate the story, and they don't even corroborate that well, are Christian accounts. And they're not necessarily reliable because they're written by Christians. Now, if you had, say, a militant atheist writing and saying, gee, this guy Jesus raised from the dead, that's kind of odd.
Okay, good. Now, you're serious, right? You're not playing a game with me?
Oh, I'm not playing a game with you at all.
Okay. What I've just heard you say is, in order for me to accept the Gospels as historically reliable, I have to have an atheist who is convinced that Jesus rose from the dead.
Not just an atheist. Not just,
whoa, that's what you said.
I said that would be one good thing. You don't have to have an atheist. You could have someone from another religion.
Don't you hear what you're saying?
You could have. Pick one.
That's what you said. I didn't make that up. You said it, not me.
People rose
You
from the
sat
dead
there
all
and
the
said,
time.
what I would really like to have is, I'd love to have an atheist.
I would love that.
Writing about Jesus really rose from the dead.
That would be fantastic to me. Yes.
Sir, that's an impossibility.
Not necessarily.
How on earth are you going to have an atheist writing, this guy Jesus really rose from the dead? You think he's still going to be an atheist?
Okay, take someone from another religion.
All right.
there are lots of accounts that were accepted of people raising from the dead. There was a Z name. I got it in my notes here somewhere.
Okay.
This guy dies, comes back from the dead, and it was a pretty well accepted account. A lot of people actually reported it as actually having happened. And in fact, people that didn't necessarily agree with the tenets of the religion under which it happened. The Thracian god Zalmoxis was buried, resurrected, and deified in his own lifetime, as described in the mid-5th century BC by Herodotus. He's also mentioned in Plato's Charmides, and that's in the early 4th century BC. And then you have the hostile account, which comes up and it says, well, Zalmoxis buried himself alive, telling his foxers he would be resurrected in 3 years, but merely resided in a hitting dwelling all that time. I mean, you don't have, there's no hostile account, ever.
Of Jesus.
Right. There's no hostile account that would lead you to believe that he rose from the dead, or that there's not even a real hostile account that would lead you to believe that the tomb was empty. And even if the tomb is empty, you don't necessarily have to believe that Jesus raised from the dead.
Josephus writes in Antiquities 18.3.3 that Jesus rose from the dead. Josephus was not a follower of Christ. Josephus writes about it.
When was
Antiquities
Josephus writing?
18.3.3.
When was Josephus writing?
Early 100s, wasn't he?
I believe so.
Yeah.
But isn't it possible that he's just recounting the cult of this cult that's risen? He's recounting their religious belief?
He's a man who is not a follower of Christ, saying that it's purported that Jesus rose from the dead.
Yeah, he's saying it's purported. He's never attests to its veracity. He just says that's what they believe.
That's right. He didn't see Jesus risen from the dead, but he's recording that that's what people are claiming, that they saw Jesus risen from the dead.
There's no outside corroborating evidence.
Yeah, but don't you see what you're saying? You're saying that in order for me to accept those Gospels as reliable, I have to have someone who saw Jesus risen from the dead and chose not to believe in him.
I'm right.
You don't think that's unrealistic?
Not necessarily.
Well, if you're going to see Jesus risen from the dead,
I mean, you could see
you're not going to believe, you're going to go out and write
afterwards.
hostile references about him?
You could see Jesus walking around after that, and, not even necessarily, you could just see Jesus and not even hear about it and write it down. I mean, like all the anonymous witnesses and the seeing the multitude, nobody wrote that down except for people that were already Christians, that were Christians when Jesus was alive.
No. Remember, when Jesus was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, all of his disciples deserted him. They were not true believers. They were Christ deniers, Christ deserters, Christ betrayers. These guys were not true believers.
If there is no God, there is no love.
Right.
I don't see what's wrong with that. Yeah.
All right, fine. But just realize that that's reality.
Right.
Which means
I think we're coming
nobody really genuinely cares for you. Rather, they have biochemical reactions that predispose them to maybe be positive towards you. But this bit about your mom and dad loving you, they don't love you. They have a biological drive to help you preserve your life.
I think it's oversimplified, but yeah. In fact, I know for that in some Indian languages, for instance, there is no word that means love in the sense that I love one person. I love someone as my or more particularly, there is no concept of being in love with someone. It almost seems like that supports what you're saying. It is just a chemical construction. I mean, sort of an abstraction from the chemical processes.
Okay.
It doesn't seem to keep those people from living unhappy lives.
That's right. Because I can promise you, they don't live like that.
How do you explain?
See, Jean-Paul Sartre put it best when he said, I have tried to live out my atheism. It's desperately hard and difficult. It's almost impossible to live it out. Because if atheism is true, then life is an accident, morality is totally relative, which means it doesn't matter whether you slaughter him or feed him. And when it comes to love, that's just a biochemical drive. That's not something, there's no such thing as genuine caring for another person. I was at Duke, and this student was arguing, there is no God. I said, fine, what motivates Mother Teresa to work among the dying in Calcutta? He said, obviously, a drive to preserve the genetic pool. And he's right.
Or some other kind of delusion.
All right, it's just a biological drive that Mother Teresa had to sacrifice her life for the dying in Calcutta.
Just because.
My experience of life says garbage. My experience of life is there are some people who hate my guts. And there are other people who really do love me. I know that might seem very difficult for any of you to believe, but there are some people who really care about me. And they've sacrificed, not motivated by a sex drive, not motivated by a drive to preserve the genetic pool. And to tell you the truth, sir, that's the most important thing in my life. Love. In my family, in my marriage, with the 3 boys I have, with my friends. And yet if there is no God, love is just an illusion. Because if there is no God, all we have is complex biochemical reactions going off in the brain, and it's all just determinism wins the day.
Is ice cream just an illusion? It's just a set of chemicals mixed together, and I mean, just because
Not an
love,
illusion.
just because love
It's
is
something physical and tangible, ice cream.
I mean,
Show me a foot of love.
happiness.
Measure me out a pound of love.
Happiness.
You can't. Love is a value. And if there is no God, love, it doesn't exist in reality. I mean, we can create things in our heads, but in reality, there's no such thing as me freely choosing to take out my wallet and give you money because I care about you. That doesn't exist.
Is happiness real?
Well, it depends how you define happiness.
I mean, we've found chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, that if you give them to people, they become happy. If you
Fine.
take them away, people cannot be happy.
That's
So
if
does
there
that
is
mean-
no God,
does-
that's what happiness is.
Well,
If there is no God, happiness is a serotonin level.
But we've just shown you can adjust serotonin levels and make people happy or make people not happy.
Fine.
So I mean, does that mean happiness is worthless?
No.
Well,
But then just live that out. I mean, if that's what you believe. If you believe that happiness is a result of a serotonin level, that's all there is to real joy, then live that out.
Well, I mean, if I want vitamin C, I go to my local drugstore and get some vitamin pills. But no, I like the taste of an orange, so I eat an orange. An orange is real, that vitamin C is fake and manufactured by a man. I enjoy the taste of an orange. I don't eat an orange because it's got vitamin C in it. I eat an orange because it tastes good. I don't take
Right.
serotonin pills to make myself happy. I do things for other people and for myself to make me happy.
but the result is that serotonin is released, and that's what makes you happy. Like the reason why you like oranges is ostensibly because it has sugar in it, and when you eat sugar, that makes your body feel good. That makes your endorphins go up, your serotonin levels increase. That's why you like it, because it makes you feel good.
What if I
Because
just
the
like
chemicals in
color
your brain,
orange?
the chemical composition of your body has changed.
But what if I like just the color of the orange? Or what if I like just the way...
Okay, guys, but you're talking about physical, and I agree with you. If there is no God, we have physical appetites.
I agree with that. I think...
I'm standing here saying, guess what, guys? There's a non-physical, non-material part to reality. Part of that non-physical part to reality is a value called love. To be honest with you guys, love is what makes my life go round and round. I've never seen a foot of love. I've never measured out a pound of love. It's an intangible, invisible, non-material, non-chemical value.
Have you ever measured out a pound of happiness? Have you ever measured out a foot of happiness?
No.
But we can cause happiness with just these chemicals. I mean, that's
Well,
my
it
only
depends
point.
what you
This
define as
chemical-
happiness. How do you define happiness?
So you're saying it's fake or is it real?
This feeling is caused by
Well,
chemicals.
fine.
That's
If you
all I'm
define
saying.
happiness as a biochemical reaction in your body, that can exist without there being a God.
Yes.
But there cannot be the real value of love,
No.
which flows from a free will, if there is no God. Because if there is no God, all of reality is matter and energy. So you got oranges, you got serotonin levels, you got jolts from caffeine,
You beg the
you got a
question.
biochemical reaction.
You beg the question by saying the real value of love does not exist if it's just a chemical. You're presupposing that there is some real value of love beyond chemical reaction.
I'm insisting that there is my experience tells me people have genuinely loved me, and I have chosen to love other people. And that is a crucial ingredient to life.
I don't think you can have your cake and eat it too. Here.
Sir, it's very simple when it comes to omniscience. I can know what someone's going to freely choose to do and not be manipulating them to do it. You've got to allow for God to be outside of the dimension of time. Therefore, he sees all of time at a glance, which means due to his perspective, he can see what you and I will freely choose to do.
But God set
You can
everything
certainly
in motion,
grasp
right?
that, I'm sure.
I
You can grasp that one.
I understand your analogy, but again, you're using a false analogy.
I'm not analogizing. That's not an analogy. God is outside of time. The Bible insists God is eternal, which means God is not limited by the dimension of time, the way you and I are. Which means, due to the fact that God is outside of the dimension of time, he can see all of history at a glance, in the same way that God's omnipresent. I am not omnipresent. I'm limited to one space at one time. But God can be in India, South America, and Athens, Georgia at the same time. Why? Because he's not locked into the dimension of space.
Okay,
all right?
But God set everything in motion, correct? And before he set everything in motion, he knew exactly what was going to happen from setting things in motion the way he did, correct?
He saw what was going to happen.
He saw exactly what was going to happen.
Yes.
So he could have said, I am going to start things slightly differently so that this different course of events happens.
You bet.
So God, at the beginning, had the option to know exactly what was going to happen from any possible world that he created.
Yes.
So, I mean, doesn't that, in the end, make it so that God is, in fact, responsible for everything that happens, period?
No. He's not responsible for the way I abuse my free will. Obviously, he's responsible for giving me free will. He's the one who gave me free will. But when he gives me free will, he's not responsible for the way I choose to exercise my free will. If I give you $1 to go out and buy a drink, it's not God giving you $1. I gave you the dollar. Similarly, if I steal your money, that's not God stealing your money. I chose to steal your money. Now, obviously, the difficult question is, why did God choose to give us free will? Ultimately, I don't know why God chose to give us free will. But please consider this option. Is it not possible for God, in his infinite wisdom, to allow short-term evil and suffering in order to bring about greater good? Let me say it one more time. Is it not possible for God, in his infinite wisdom, to allow short-term evil in order to bring about a long-term greater good?
I'm still not at all satisfied. You seem to be assuming free will. My problem is that I cannot possibly see having free will at the same time as God setting everything in motion and knowing all the consequences of everything that he did at the beginning. It's like if I make a machine that runs its course, and there are some variables inside the machine, I mean, whatever, but I could make the machine any way that I want. And if I am omniscient, I could make the machine such that any outcome that I want happens.
False, right there. Right there. You gotta run that reel back right there. There's absolutely no way that God can make a square circle. There's absolutely no way that God can make 2 + 2 = 5, and there's absolutely no way that God can give a human being free will and guarantee that that free will is not going to create evil. If you give free will to a human being, then there is the distinct possibility that that free will is going to perpetrate evil.
I'm saying that you can't possibly have free will under the circumstances of God's omniscience, omnipotence, and creating everything. Okay,
yes, you can.
All right.
God limits his power by creating us free. Come on, you can grasp that. God freely chooses to limit his power by creating you free, which means God's saying, hands off. I'm not going to manipulate you. I'm giving you this tremendous gift of free will. Now you've got to go out and use it. You don't think that's possible?
No.
Oh, come on. You're not being honest with me. Of course that's possible.
I'm being completely honest with you.
No, you're not. You're telling me as a cogent, and you're a very articulate thinking student, you're telling me that you cannot grasp how an all-powerful God could choose to partially limit his power by creating us free?
You've got to add in omniscience.
And we've talked about that.
And
God's omniscience is simply due to his perspective outside of time. He sees all of history at a glance, the same way if you've seen a movie. You know what the characters are going to do. You've seen the movie. It doesn't mean you're forcing the characters to do what they do, but because of your perspective outside of the situation that the movie is filming, You know what's going to happen. And you can grasp that, can't you?
I am getting really frustrated with your rhetorical trick of making me seem like an idiot for not agreeing with you.
No. I articulated very clearly to you. And you came back at me and said it's impossible. Now, obviously, this is not my first day speaking on university campuses, okay? Obviously, I've debated professors and the whole bit. And I can promise you, sir, what I'm telling you is straight on, logical, rational. This is not some highfalutin idiot talk I'm giving you. It's very reasonable, and I'm not playing any game with you. I'm not playing any verbal semantic trick on you. I'm shooting straight head-to-head with you. I've respected you and commended you for the excellent, difficult issue you've raised. I've admitted to you right off the bat, this is not easy, this is difficult, this is deep water we're headed into, so I don't have simple answers. But when I make some simple statements, I hope that you would be able to see what I'm trying to say.
I am going to have to agree to disagree with you.
Fair enough.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this episode. Hit that subscribe button. We'd love for you to join the family. Also, want to invite you to our church in New Canaan, Connecticut. It's New Canaan High School, and it meets Sundays at 9:30 a.m.